Good afternoon. In this video, I'm going to look at how double-minded Robert Breaker is. And we'll look at his exposition of Acts 18 through 28. And his other one is the Apostle Paul, the first date setter. So we're in about 53 minutes in here. Let's go back here. 52 minutes in now.
Your time with him, he consented not. Why? Verse 21, but bade them farewell, saying, I must by all means keep this feast that cometh in Jerusalem, but I will return again unto you if God will. And he sailed from Ephesus. Why would he want to keep a feast in Jerusalem? People say because he's still under the law and we're still under the law today. No, we've seen that Paul preaches we're not under the law. So I don't think Paul is trying to follow the law and be at a feast. I think in his mind, Paul is thinking there's this feast, and I know it's going to happen on this day, and I want the Jews to get saved, so you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go to when the most Jews are there so I can reach even more Jews with the gospel. And that's what he did.
Is that what he says in Paul, the first date setter? Paul was going back to win Jews? See why these double-minded guys would lie to you? Let's go here. Apostle Paul, the first date setter.
Asia. What's in Asia? Well, down south in Asia is Jerusalem. And the Holy Spirit's going, no, just keep going and getting more Gentiles saved. Don't go back. But Paul says, no, I want to go back. What was it that made Paul want to go back? Well, go to Acts chapter 18. You see, this is one of the greatest things that's a sin that Paul ever did. You know, there are very few sins in the Bible that we find that the Apostle Paul committed. Yes, there are those that he committed before he was saved, when he persecuted and killed true Christians, those that were believers. But after Paul was saved, there's very few sins we find. But one of them, one of the greatest sins, a sin that many scholars for centuries have said, we just don't know why Paul did this, was the sin of Paul telling the Holy Spirit, no, you're telling me not to go back to Asia, but I'm going to do it anyway. What was it within the heart of the Apostle Paul that made him want to disobey God and go back to Jerusalem when God said not to? What was it? Well, go to Acts chapter 18 and verse 19. Acts 18:19 says, and he came to Ephesus and left them there, but he himself entered into the synagogue and reasoned with the Jews. 20. When they desired him to tarry longer time with them, he consented not. What do you mean he consented not? We have other places in the book of Acts where he preached so long into the middle of the night that a guy fell asleep and fell out a window. That's not like Paul to say, yeah, I would witness to you some more, but I don't feel like it. I got to go someplace, got to go do something. And then he says here in verse 21, but bade them farewell, saying, now watch what Paul says, saying, I must by all means keep this feast that cometh in Jerusalem. But I will return again unto you, if God will. And he sailed from Ephesus. What on earth, Paul? Paul, you've already written the book of Galatians. You've already told us that we are no longer under the Old Testament law. What are you doing saying you must go to Jerusalem and you must, by all means, keep a feast there? And what do you mean you'll come back if God wills? You know what I believe? I believe the Apostle Paul was the first date setter. I believe the Apostle Paul said, 54 AD was a Jubilee year for Israel. And Jesus didn't come back after the year, or the acceptable year of the Lord, and he promised to. And 40 AD, Jesus didn't come back, so we obviously weren't in that last year of Daniel. And they didn't come back at 50 AD, which would be a Jubilee of 50 years after Jesus was born. So if I'm looking at the Jubilees of Israel, 54 AD would be the next Jubilee. I think Paul, in the back of his mind, says, you know what I think? I think that's when the rapture is going to be. And I think Paul thought in his head, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go back to Israel. I'm going to stand right in the middle of the temple of the Sanhedrin. I'm going to do what Stephen did. I'm going to preach to them, and I'm going to be raptured right in front of their eyes. And they're going to go, oh, it's true. What Paul said was true. Jesus is the Messiah. That's the explain why Paul would tell the Holy Spirit, no, I'm going to go back to that feast. I'm going to do what I want to do.
Okay. He says to get Paul to get raptured. Paul's not going back to get raptured. He's going back to preach to the Jews, and he's willing to die to do so. If you listen to Breaker's exposition on Acts 21, he says that. He says Paul is willing to go back and be martyred, basically die. He's willing to die. For Paul says for him to die is gain, to live for Christ. And Breaker doesn't mention one word about the rapture. One word about Paul being raptured in there. Let's go back to Acts 18.
And so it says, and when he landed at Caesarea and gone up and saluted the church, he went down to Antioch. Okay, so he comes across here from Ephesus over to Caesarea, and then he goes up to Antioch. All right, now why didn't he go straight to Jerusalem? I don't know. But he went down to Antioch. And after he had spent some time there, he departed and went all over the country of Galatia and Phrygia in order, strengthening all the disciples. So then he goes over here, back up in this area, Galatia and Phrygia. That's where this is. So he's going all over here. Did he go to Jerusalem? Well, if he did, Luke doesn't tell us. Maybe he went to a certain feast there because he had family there. He just wanted to go visit his family. I don't know.
Nope. So it's not for rapture. It's to visit family.
I've always wondered about that because it says he wants to go keep a feast in Jerusalem, but it doesn't tell us he went to Jerusalem. Instead, it says and then he went the other way. So maybe instead of going, he missed the feast. Maybe the boat trip took too long and he missed it or something. I don't know. But as we continue in the book of Acts, you know what we're going to find? Paul doing this again. And the Holy Spirit telling him, Paul, do not go to Jerusalem. And Paul says, I'm going anyway. And that's when Paul literally disobeys God. But yet God took that disobedience and turned it around for good because Paul went in chains to Rome and was able to win people in Rome to the Lord. So
he was willing to disobey God and to die so he could witness to the Jews. By the way, that's why you have a parenthesis, 9, 10, 11 in Romans. All you people who want to go to Romans 10 for your salvation. That's to the Jews. But I'm going to stop here, put this up to show you. This guy will say one thing one place, and then totally, and that's all I have to do. All I have to do is check on this guy, and he'll be contradicting himself somewhere else. You think the word rapture would have come up somewhere? He made a video 2 years ago. Paul, the first date, said it. You think he remembered? Said, I said he was going back to Jerusalem to get to the rapture. Now he's saying, well, maybe and then his next video, 2 videos he does with exposition on Acts 21, where Paul's warned again about not going to Jerusalem, and Paul says, I don't, if I have to die, I'm going to die. He's talking about anything but the rapture. One word about the rapture. It's about dying. So I'm going to stop here and put this up to show you. These are double-minded people. He won't pull that video down. I think in the back of his mind, he was thinking he was going to get to the rapture and he's going to go up there. And now he says, well, maybe he had a feast day. He was going to go see his family on a feast day. These are unstable people. Bible Breaker is unstable. Theologically, he's unstable. Because when you got heresies in your system, this is what takes you. It takes you all in these bizarre ways. And he can't remember what he said 2 years ago about Paul being a date set and saying why he was going back to Jerusalem to be raptured. Well, I guess maybe his dates were off, maybe. He figured, well, nope, that's the wrong date. Better go back to 2 years later or something. He didn't mention one word about the rapture. Here he is, a whole big video. He gets all the views and people 1,000 thumbs up. And I thought Paul was going to be raptured. He went back to be raptured. That's what you get. He's not date set. I didn't send any dates. But then he's going to come back and do an exposition of those verses in Acts. Not one word about the rapture, people. Not one word. Well, I thought he, he's resisting the Holy Spirit because he wanted to go to be raptured. Then he needs to be consistent. But he can't do that because the scripture is talking about him being bound and dying. He's thinking he's gonna die. Not about being raptured. Well, the rapture issue doesn't come up there. But that's where you got to watch these guys. If you're a sound teacher, you're going to be consistent. You're not going to forget something you said 2 years ago. That dramatic. Where you say Paul was the first day said he went back there, and you thought he was going back to get raptured. And you don't say anything about it in the other verses. When you get to those verses, I mean, if you brought up and said, "Well, yeah, Paul could have been going back there to get raptured," and he didn't say one word. He didn't say one word about the rapture because he forgot what he said 2 years ago. Amen. Thank you.